Okay, let's look at epithelial tissue and let's come up with a definition on this and let's look at this one more specifically. So let's do epithelial tissue. Okay, and let's get a definition. That's just abbreviation ET for epithelial tissue. And let's give a definition for this. Essentially, it is a sheet of cells that line, I'll put that in quotations, that line a space. Okay. Now, epithelial tissue, I guess the more appropriate definition would be one or more layers of closely packed cells with little to no extracellular matrix. And extracellular matrix, I'll just abbreviate ECM. Okay, extracellular matrix. So what this is what is the space that we are looking at? Well, if we were to look at what epithelial tissue covers or lines, and we're looking at our skin, okay, our skin actually lines a space. So I think we can agree that this is a space out here. So this is basically, it's lining the space. If you were to look at other spaces within the body, your mouth, okay, your oral cavity is also a space, okay? So the tissue or the cell layers that line that oral cavity is epithelial tissue as well. If you were to look at other areas of the body, the digestive system, blood vessels, and so forth, they also line a space in that area. So if you were to look at the digestive system, and if it begins with the oral cavity in the mouth, the digestive system is essentially a long tube, okay, starting at the mouth, and it goes down the esophagus and gets into your stomach, and then it works its way through the intestine, small intestine and large intestine. And if you were to look on the inside of that, you have essentially a tube going through the body. So epithelial tissue is going to line that as well. So let's look at some of the characteristics of epithelial tissue. So let me come over here. So some of the characteristics of epithelial tissue, let's just list those out. And the first one, we said it lines a space. Okay, so it lines a space, whether it's the skin or whether it lines a tube in your body. It can line cavities, okay? We have our thoracic cavity, we have your abdominal cavities, so we're going to have tissue that lines that structure as well. The next thing we said is here, where we're talking about closely packed cells. So the second characteristic we'll talk about are closely packed cells. So let's look at what we're doing here. Let me just change the color. Let's just do this color. Okay. So what we're looking at on closely packed cells, what I mean by this, these are individual cells, let's just say. I'm not doing a great job drawing, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so these are cells lined up right next to each other that are closely packed. Okay, so there's not really any space in between each one of these cells. Now, other lectures or other videos we're going to do, we'll talk about the shapes of cells and how you define what those shapes are. But these are closely packed cells. Now, what we're looking at is the epithelial tissue is also, I guess you can say it's polarized. So we have different surfaces on this. And by different surfaces, when we say that there are tissues or cells that line a space or covers organs, so we need to have something that is open to a free surface. So in this case, let me just change the color here. This case, so this would be space up here. Okay, so all this is just extra space. So this is going to be a surface on, this is going to be a certain surface layer, and this is going to be a certain surface layer. Okay, so this area up here, it could be the inside of a blood vessel, or it could be lining a cavity, it could be covering an organ. Okay, and we'll go into that a little bit further when we go down further on this. So let's look at, let me go back here. And let's do number 3. What we're looking at on here, it is avascular. So epithelial tissue is avascular. Now, avascular, what does that mean? Okay, vascular, you know, is blood vessels. So avascular is no blood supply. There's no blood supply going to those cells. Now, those cells are still alive, and anything that's alive is going to need oxygen. It's going to need various nutrients in order for it to survive, and part of life is you are going to create waste products. And in cells, that's going to be, you know, a common one, carbon dioxide. So one of the things that you're going to do, you need oxygen and nutrients getting to that cell, and then you are needing to remove some of those waste products. Now, how does that happen in this case? So let's look at how those cells in this area receive its nutrition, receive its oxygen, and remove its waste products. So what we're looking at on this one, let me just, so this is a little blood vessel on what we're looking at. And you can see that blood vessel isn't going through those cells. It's not embedded in these different cells in this area. And how those nutrients and oxygen and waste products work its way to and from the cells is by what's called diffusion. Okay, so which is a movement of substances from high concentration to low concentration. So what we're looking at on this one is nutrients or oxygens from here diffuses across, and it comes this way, and it gets to that cell. So it's just diffusing through the extracellular matrix, through other tissues to get to those cells in which to nourish it. Okay. Likewise, what we're dealing with also on waste products would then work its way back into the blood vessels, and then it gets carried away either through, if it's carbon dioxide, it's going to make its way to the lungs. It could be other waste products as well. So those are what we're looking at on what avascular means. Another thing we are looking at is, let's do, it's got a basement membrane. Basement membrane. Okay, so what we mean by basement membrane on this, let's change here. We know we have different sides to the cell. Okay, so this is a surface up here or a space up here that the cell is open to, and then the bottom side is not going to be open. So it's going to be connecting to something else. So if this is this, and we're going to be naming this side of the cell versus this side. So this side is where the basement membrane is going to be. So the epithelial tissue, let me just draw through here, is going to be connected to that surface of the cell. So this is going to be the basement membrane, okay? And this surface is actually called the basolateral surface. I think that's basolateral. That's going to be the basolateral surface, and then that makes this side, which is open to space, it's going to be open to a free area. This side of the epithelial cell is actually called the apical surface. Apical surface. Another word for that would also be luminal. M-I-N-A-L, I believe. Luminal. So that's the different surfaces that we have. So we have the basolateral surface, or probably it's really not a surface. Let's call that an edge. Okay, basolateral edge probably is a little bit better description. And then we're going to have our apical surface, which is open to the free side, or it's going to be open to a cavity, okay, or it's going to be open to the inside of a tube. Now, for the inside of a tube, we have blood vessels in our body, okay? The blood vessels that, or the cells that line the inside of that blood vessel would be on the apical side. So let me show you what I mean by this one. So let me do a cross section. So let's say if I was to cut that blood vessel right there, okay, and I was to show you a cross section of that blood vessel. Okay, so let me just kind of draw that. Okay, when we're looking at that, okay, so this is the blood vessel. I've done a cross section, and the different surfaces, this is the space in here. Okay, that space is called the lumen. Okay, so this would make this surface the luminal surface, or the luminal edge, which makes that the apical surface. Okay, so that's the apical surface. It would be this side, okay, it's on the outer side, which comes to the basolateral surface. Okay, so a couple key things that you want to take away from this so far is epithelial tissue lines a space. They consist of closely packed cells with very little extracellular matrix. Now, I don't know if I spoke of that yet, but extracellular matrix is the stuff outside of cells. So if you were to look at a cell and you have stuff inside the cell, that would be intracellular matrix. The stuff outside of a cell is the extracellular matrix. So if we have closely packed cells, there's really no space in here to consist of extracellular matrix. Okay? It's avascular, so you don't have a blood supply running through this. It receives its nutrition via diffusion. It gets rid of its waste products through diffusion. Epithelial tissue has a basement membrane. And that basement membrane, the function of that basement membrane is to connect it to the underlying tissue. So there's tissue under here, including this blood vessel. So there's other tissue down here that the epithelial tissue is connected with. So this connective tissue, let me use a different color here. So let's use, I guess that light blue would be fine. Okay, we're going to have stuff. It's like, am I just scribbling on this? Okay. All of this other stuff is connective tissue. Okay, and connective tissue connects things, binds things together. Okay, so in this case, we have our epithelial tissue attaching to a basement membrane, and that basement membrane attaches to the underlying connective tissue. Okay. The other thing is it can form sheets. That's an S, okay, by a sheet. So if you were to take a piece of paper, okay, and wrap it around something, you can see how it forms a sheet that covers that surface. Well, you can also take that sheet, crumple it up, and if you look close enough, it's still one sheet. It's all jaggedy, but it's still part of a sheet that you can look at. So let's look at a couple other pictures here. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, here's an example of epithelial tissue. Okay, actually, this white area in this area is the, let me go through here. I don't know if we can, no, yeah, this white area in here, this is the inside of a tube. Okay, so this is part of a tube. Actually, this looks like a ureter. Okay, it's a tube that goes from the kidney to the bladder. Okay, and we have tissue that lines this. Okay, so this would be the apical surface over here, and down here is going to be the basolateral surface on this. Here, let's just do this one. Okay, let me bring this one up a little bit closer. And what you're looking at, this is going to be a space. Okay, there's nothing out here. So this surface is what? Is it going to be the basolateral, or is this one going to be the other one? It's going to be the apical surface, or also known as, it's the luminal surface. Okay, so this is the luminal surface. This is going to be the basolateral surface. So anytime you see tissue like that, you're looking for that end. There might be another picture. Here's another picture just showing you various tissue types. Again, this is the apical surface on here. And down here is going to be the basolateral surface connecting to the underlying structure. So let me see if I can get a close-up picture of this. A little bit. If you were to look at right here, see, these are individual cells. Okay, so you can see these individual cells. So that's the cell or the plasma membrane, and you're going to have the cytoplasm in here. Those purple dots, that's going to be the nucleus. So we have various cells out here. And you can see this line right down in here. Okay, that's going to be the basement membrane. So these cells on the basolateral surface attached to the basement membrane, which then connects to the underlying connective tissue. So that's what we're talking about on that one. Okay, so it does form a sheet. We said it covers. Let me do one. It's extensive innervation. Innervation means you have a lot of nerves. Okay, so if this is on your skin, so if we're looking at our epithelial tissue, okay, which is our skin, part of the integumentary system, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, we have a lot of nerve endings in this area. Okay, now those nerve endings will pick up a variety of different things. It can be from temperature, it could be pain receptors. So that's highly or have extensive innervations. If we have nerves on the inside of blood vessels or inside parts of your kidney, those nerves are picking up signals, because remember, nerves are dealing with communication throughout the body. So if we have nerves inside of a blood vessel, one of the things we're recording is your blood pressure. We are also monitoring the amount of oxygen in your blood. Okay, and then once those nerves pick up that signal goes to your brain, says, okay, this is the amount of oxygen we have. Is this enough, or do we need to make more? Okay, so there's a high or extensive innervation on that. And then the last one that we'll cover here is it covers or lines stuff or things. Okay, so if we were to think about what it means by covering organs, it covers organs or it lines cavities or it lines things. Let's look at, let's just do this one here. Let's do, if I can do this fairly decent. Okay, not a great artist, but I think you can figure out that that's the heart. Now we have epithelial tissue that line the heart. Okay, so if, let's just do this in, let's just do this pink. Okay, so we're going to have tissue. Let's just do a different color. That one doesn't show up very well. Let's just do green. So we have tissue that line this organ. Okay. Okay. So this is epithelial tissue. Okay. And it is covering an organ. Now, this is on the outside, and we have open space in the heart. Okay. So would this be the basolateral surface? Or would this be the apical surface? Because remember, you have other things out here. So I'll let you think about that one. Let's look at different things. The heart is located in a cavity. So let's review up a little bit, and let's look at what cavities the heart occupies. The biggest regional cavity that it's located in is your chest, your upper chest, which would be the thoracic cavity. If we were to break that down into a specific cavity, the heart lines the pericardial cavity or the pericardial cavity. Okay, so if we were to draw another cavity here, okay, if we were to have, this is the pericardial cavity. Okay, that's basically the pericardial, okay? And we are going to have tissue that line the cavity. So we're going to have a tissue that lines out here. Okay, so that tissue is also lining a cavity. So this is epithelial tissue. That's epithelial tissue. Okay, if you were to name the parts of membranes, okay, this is the visceral pericardium. It's closer to the heart. Parietal pericardium. It lines the cavity. Okay, so those are a couple of the different things that we are looking at for this one. Let me see, is there anything else I want to cover on this one? Avascular. No, I think that covers this one. So that's a basic, those are the basic characteristics of epithelial tissue. And now why don't we go back into the functional components of epithelial tissue.